Hi, I'm Randy Nelson. I'm the off-road technical trainer for Polaris Industries, and today we're going to install a 4,500-pound winch with rapid rope technology on this Turbo S. Before we begin, we want to make sure we read the instructions in their entirety and make sure all parts and tools are accounted for. We want to make sure we retain these instructions for future references and parts ordering information. Before we begin working on this vehicle, we want to ensure that the vehicle isn't parked and the ignition switch is off with the key removed from the vehicle. So we're going to go ahead and remove the driver's seat here to access the battery on this vehicle. We want to make sure we disconnect the battery before we start working on any parts of the vehicle. Once we have the seat removed, we want to go ahead and disconnect the battery cables. So we always want to make sure we disconnect the ground cable first, and then we disconnect the positive cable. So we'll go ahead and get that disconnected. Have to do a little wiggle, get it off, and lay it aside, and then we'll go ahead and disconnect the positive cable also from the battery. And then what I always like to do also is I also like to get like a shop rag and just lay it on top of the battery terminals just for a little added protection. So I'll go get a shop rag and lay that on there. So we're going to go ahead and remove the hood. The hood is held in place by 2 quarter turns on the hood. Let's go ahead and rotate those, lift up on it, and slide forward on the hood. And then next we're going to go ahead and remove the front grille assembly. There's 2 tabs on the front here where you just got to push down on them and then tip out on the grille and remove that from the vehicle. So we're going to go ahead and remove the winch cover from the vehicle. On the bottom there's 2 screws right here that I've already removed. So we're just going to tilt out on this a little bit. We don't want to pry out on it because we will break the tabs. On the top side here, one on either side, there's just a tab. We just got to pull up on them and kind of lift it forward. And we'll remove it from the vehicle. You can kind of see these 2 tabs right here on the cover itself. So our next step here is we're going to remove the tow hook from the vehicle. But before we remove the tow hook from the vehicle, there's actually a backing plate on the back side of the frame here. And if we pull these screws off, there is the possibility that backing plate's going to fall down. We don't want that to happen. At the top of the backing plate, it actually hooks over the top of the front of the vehicle here. So a little tip here is to get some tape and come from the driver's side of the vehicle and put some tape on that backing plate to hold it in place while you remove the screws. So we'll go ahead and remove those screws. They are a 15 millimeter. So I'm just keeping my hand on the backing plate. I'll go ahead and loosen those up. And we'll get the tow hook removed and we'll set the fasteners aside. The fasteners will not be used later in the instructions. And you can kind of see the backing plate right there kind of moving through the holes. That's what we don't want to lose. So that tape's kind of holding it in place right now. There is room again to come from the driver's side through the fender well and get your hand just in front of that gear case to hold it in place. So when you put this back together, you want to make sure you support that plate on the back side when you're reinstalling the new screws. So we'll continue on. So we're going to go ahead and install the winch backer plate into the channel here, into the frame. So this is a support channel part of the vehicle. What we're going to do is we're going to send this stud up through this center hole here. That's actually going to be one of the smaller holes across this support channel here. So we're going to go ahead and feed this through. And we're going to just feed it through, but you're going to have to use your fingers to kind of walk it into position. It's a little tricky to get in there, but it does go in there. Just get it into place. And then we'll send that stud through the center hole and we'll go ahead and install the nut on there. So we got the bracket installed in the support channel with the nut on there. We're going to tighten that nut up. And what you'll notice is there's a little bit of movement back and forth. And that little bit of movement can cause these other holes not to line up. So what I'm going to do is in the kit you have these other bolts that are going to be used later here to mount the winch onto the vehicle. We're going to go ahead and install these bolts into that backer bracket just to hold it in place there. That way the holes are lined up. So what we're going to do next, we're just going to go ahead and tighten up the nut here. We'll get that snug down, and what we'll do is we'll come back and actually torque that to specifications. So our next spot here is I'm just going to go ahead and remove these bolts that I installed previously. And the only reason I installed those is to line the hole up in that winch support bracket. So when we put the winch into place, we can easily hit those holes and tighten everything up and everything will be nice and straight. So we're going to go ahead and begin the install of putting the winch onto the vehicle, but first we need to pass through some wiring through the vehicle. So I got the yellow cable going to the winch motor and the blue cable also going to the winch motor. We also got the controller wiring right here for the fairlead that's already mounted on the winch bracket. So all this has to pass through this opening. So right here I just got it on a little shop creeper. And what I'm doing is kind of walking all this wiring through there. And I'm just going to come through the side of the vehicle on the driver's side and just kind of slowly kind of pull those pieces through. You'll also notice that there's clips on the harness. Once those pass through there, these clips will actually fasten onto the frame on fastening points on the back side. So we'll go ahead and continue moving this wiring through the vehicle, and then we'll put the winch into position here. So before I mount the winch onto the vehicle, I kind of want to point out here that there's two of these white connectors on here, one with a really long cable that we got to route inside the body of the vehicle, which I already passed all that through with the blue and the yellow motor cables. But the other little white connector here with the green and white wire, there is a Y harness that's actually provided in the kit for you. You need to make sure you plug this in to that connector first before mounting the winch onto the vehicle. Otherwise, there's not enough hand room in there to actually connect this. So on this Y harness, these two ends here, one of these ends actually is going to be used for our wireless receiver, which is right here. So that'll actually be mounted in the vehicle. We're not going to connect this at this time. We don't need to. But we do need to make sure we pass this Y harness through the body of the vehicle with the other wires before we can make our connections on the back side. So we'll go ahead and do that, and then we'll go ahead and mount the winch back into the body, or mount the winch in the body, excuse me. So we'll go ahead and get those wires passed through. And then as we're moving the winch into position, we just want to make sure everything's kind of getting through that hole in the frame before we line our winch up. So we're going to go ahead and loosely install these bolts into the winch bracket that we ran earlier. And we're just going to go ahead and get those started with our fingers. We're not going to tighten these up yet because we're just going to get them loosely started. These are the 15 millimeters. And then we'll go ahead and just let that sit there, let the winch hang. And then we got two more on the bottom we have to install, and I'll show you that. So our next step here is we're going to install the lower bolts into the winch. So these are the other bolts in the kit. They're a 15 millimeter head. Now these are going to go through these access holes, and they're going to screw into that plate that we put the tape on earlier in the step. As an added tip, I would still put your hand on the driver's side in front of the gear case to hold that plate in place while you get these screws started. Now there is a possibility these screws will drop because it's kind of a small area to work in. So I'll get one started here if I can. And I got one started, and we'll go ahead and do the other one. And then once we get that started, we'll go back and we'll torque those to specifications. Again, I'm supporting that plate on the back side with my right hand. So just as an added note, when we're installing those two bottom bolts and the winch plate down here, we're not reusing the tow hook on the front of the vehicle anymore, but you want to hold on to that in case you decide to remove the winch at any time. So we're going to go ahead and prepare the winch contactor before installing it into the vehicle. So in the kit, you got your red and black cables here. We're going to go ahead and install those to the winch contactor. The posts on the winch contactor have little color markings on there. The red cable goes to the mark with the red mark, and the black cable is going to go to the post with the black mark. So we're going to go ahead and just unscrew these nuts here. And what you want to just add a note here, this black cable here with this ring terminal, we're going to make sure that stays in there. We're not removing that. So we're going to go ahead and install these. So we'll go ahead and install the red one. Little added note here, you'll notice on the cable there's a little drop kind of to the terminal here. We want to have that kind of facing down. It just makes routing a lot smoother and just looks a lot cleaner when it gets into the vehicle. So we'll go ahead and just going to loosely install that nut on there for right now, and we'll go ahead and do the same thing with the black cable. And just an added note, the rubber boots always go on to the contactor. So what we're going to do is we're going to route these cables like the directions actually tell us how to route it. So this one's going to be routed, both going to be kind of vertically, because these are eventually going to go up and get power from the terminal block area. So this one we're just going to route like that. The red one, we'll go ahead and snug that down. We'll leave a little room there for the yellow cable, and then we'll go ahead and tighten the black one down. And you'll notice that the connector for the winch contactor is on my right-hand side. So we'll go ahead and put the protective boots back over these studs, and then we'll prep this for the install for the view. So our next step here is we're going to install the winch contactor on the bulkhead of the vehicle. There's already holes provided in the bulkhead here. There's 4 of them. And when the winch contactor goes in, it's going to mount just like this. So the red and black cable is going to be routed upwards towards the terminal block. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the provided screws in the kit and go ahead and install those with my 8mm socket. So I went ahead and finished mounting the winch contactor to the bulkhead, and I went ahead and ran my black and red cables up towards the terminal block. I haven't connected those yet, but I went ahead and routed my yellow and my blue cables from my winch motor to the frame. And what we're going to do is we're going to route them up to the winch contactor and make those connections now. So again, make sure the rubber boots are on there because they will slide back over the post on the contactor. So our top post here is going to be our yellow one, and our bottom one is going to be for our blue one. So we're going to go ahead and remove these nuts, and we're going to make those connections. So I went ahead and ran all the cables up here. The other cable here, this is going to our winch, which is actually for our fair lead controller. So we have our black wire and we have an orange wire here. These actually got to go onto the terminal block. So I went ahead and loosened up the nuts here, all except for the orange one yet. And what we're going to do is we're going to remove these nuts, and we're going to fasten the black wire to the black wire and the red wire to the red wire, and then the ring terminal with the black wire here to the black wire. And then our orange wire here is going to go to the accessory key power, which means that'll be powered when the key's in the on position. So, a little added note here. These 2 wires here, they're running from the terminal block to the battery. These are our accessory power wires. This vehicle comes standard with these cables already on there. So we're going to go ahead and remove the ground nut here on the terminal block. And what I want to do is I want to remove the cable that's currently on there. I'm going to pull that cable off, and what I want to do is I want to sandwich the wiring, or the ring terminal, kind of underneath. I want that at the bottom. Doesn't have to be, but it's just nice to put that there. And then our other black cable from our winch contactor is going to go on, and then I'm going to put the power cable going from the ground terminal here to the battery negative. So that'll go on there, and we're just going to stagger these ring terminals. And we're going to get our nut back on there and get that started. So that's on there. We're just going to go ahead and get a few threads started. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and remove the red battery cable from the bus bar. Again, pulling that cable off. And what I'm doing is I'm running the red cable from our winch contactor to the battery post, battery positive, here. And also, I'm also going to install the other red cable back on to the bus bar. I'm just going to loosely install that nut for right now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and loosen up the accessory wire, and we're going to run that other ring terminal here, this orange one, and that's going to be routed onto here. So I'm going to take that nut off, and then we'll go ahead and make that attachment. So we hadn't connected our cables up, but we're just going to leave these nuts loose for right now. We still have some more wires we have to run up to the bus bar for the wireless receiver, so we'll go ahead and continue on. So the wire here that's in my right hand with the black and green wire going to this white connector, this is going to be coming from the control box, and it's going to be plugging into the winch contactor. So that's going to be our next step. So we'll go ahead and make that connection. And just as an added note, everything is green to green on each side of the connector, and everything's black to black on every connector. So there should be nothing crisscrossed over. So green to green, black to black on all the white connectors, and we'll continue on. So I went ahead and installed the wireless receiver on top of the front drive mounting plate. And right now I have the wires facing forward towards the radiator. and I routed the orange and black wire with the ring terminals on it upwards to the terminal block. And that wireless receiver is going to be held in place with provided zip ties in the kit. So we're going to go ahead and make those zip tie connections to secure that wireless receiver to that location. So I went ahead and mounted the wireless receiver inside the vehicle there. You'll notice that I have one zip tie on one side here. There's also another one on the other side. I went ahead and made the connections on the wireless receiver to that Y connection we installed earlier. The other empty connection you're seeing there, that would be if you had a hardwired switch into the dash. This vehicle is not going to be equipped with a hardwired switch in the dash. It's just going to have the wireless remote. So that's the reason why that port is empty. So I got the wireless receiver power and ground wires in my hand here. So the black wire here with the ring terminal, that's going to hook up to our black cables here on our terminal bus bar here. And our orange wire here is going to hook up to our orange-white wire on our terminal bus or our accessory power. So this is actually what we call key switch power. In the kit here, there's a little jumper wire with a ring terminal on one end and a spade connector on the other. We went ahead and made that connection here on the orange wire. So we're going to go ahead and remove the nuts on the terminal bar for the black and the orange wire here. And we're going to go ahead and make those connections. So orange to orange, and then the black one is going to go to the black cables. And what I like to do here is I always like to sandwich the larger ring terminal under the smaller one. The reason I do that, as you can kind of see here, is that the hole in this is a little smaller here on the larger cable here, so it'll be a little more bite, and it's also a lot thicker too. So I like to sandwich that one kind of down underneath the rest of the cables. And then what we'll do is we'll come back here and we'll go ahead and torque these down. We don't want to make sure we don't over torque them, otherwise we'll break the studs off on the terminal block, and we'll need to get a new terminal block. So we'll go ahead and take care of that, and we'll come back on to the next step. So we're going to go ahead and reinstall the front grille. Just an added note, there's little tabs here at the bottom of the grille. They got to go into these little spots on the front fascia. So we'll get those into the front fascia first, and we'll kind of rock the grille into position and make sure it latches in. Give it a pull, make sure it's secure. Now we can go ahead and proceed to putting the hood on. I want to make sure you kind of give the hood a little bit of a pull up on it, make sure it's secure, and it is secure. So we're going to go ahead and reconnect the battery back up, so we'll go ahead and pull that shop rig off we put on earlier. I'm going to leave that just kind of touching there. We're going to go ahead and put the positive cable on first, and we're going to go ahead and torque that down. Just want to snug that up. And we always want to make sure we hook up the positive cable first. And then just get the rubber boot back on, and we'll go ahead and we'll reconnect the ground cable, and I'm going to toss it underneath the handle for the battery. Get a little better flush mount. And that's mounted, so we'll go ahead and tighten that one down. And now we're snug there. We'll push that handle down, get the rag out of there, and we'll go ahead and put in the driver's seat back into the vehicle. Make sure we get that latched under there, and we got our harnesses, so we're just going to have to wrap those around the seat. Get everything in the position, latch it in, everything is secure. So we're going to go ahead and find a suitable location to mount the wireless remote for the winch. And inside the kit, you get a couple of these torque screws that screw into the plastic, and then part of the wireless remote, there's a holster. Now this holster needs to be mounted in a suitable location where you can still remove the remote control from the holster. On this vehicle, this is a pretty decent, suitable location, and I've inspected the back side of this dash here, and there's nothing that we're going to make contact with. So if this is where we're going to mount this, we're going to drill 2 1/8-inch pilot holes and then install our screw in the dash. So to turn on the wireless remote, we need to hold down the power button at the bottom of the remote. Hold that down, and then the red light will illuminate, and now the remote is powered up, and then we can go ahead and operate the remote with the in and out function. To turn it off, it'll have an auto off, But if you want to turn it off manually, you just hold down the power button. And then the red light will go off and it shut off. Your rapid recovery winch is equipped with 3 different gear settings: high, neutral, and low. When in neutral, the end marking will show through the cutout window on the shift knob. The high gear setting is meant for rapid recovery mode only and should not be used while the rope is under load. To shift in the high gear, rotate the gear shift knob clockwise until the H marking shows through the cutout window on the shift knob. To shift in the low, rotate the gear shift knob counterclockwise until the L marking shows through the cutout window on the shift knob. For additional information on the rapid recovery winch function, please see your instruction manual included with this kit. So that concludes the installation of Polaris Pro HD 4,500 pound winch on this Turbo S. For additional information on Polaris winches or Polaris engineered accessories, please visit polaris.com/winches or your local Polaris dealership.